The theme of the conference this year is leadership is a verb. So if leadership is a verb, then it's all the things that we do day to day that determines how effective we are as leaders. And I think many of us struggle to consistently stay out of too busy. It's the vicious cycle of usually using an antecedent-based strategy to try and manage the outcomes in our environment. So if we've got too much on, the best thing that we could do is probably just stop, have a think about what I need to prioritise, can I triage some stuff? But that's the least likely thing we're probably going to do if we're too busy, because we're too busy. So it's kind of just lurching from one thing to the next, finding that I haven't really got time to manage this. It's the follow-up. So what John talked about, really the first thing today, John said, it's the follow-up which is the hardest. So that's the thing I don't have time for. So I just issue some antecedents, put some prompts out there trying to get things happening. And then 2 or 3 days, weeks later, I then remember, come round to it, and nothing's happened, predictably, as the science would say. So then I issue some sort of follow-up antecedents to see if I can get things going. So it's just existing on a diet of antecedents. So if some of these things we don't get round to, it's cherry picking, it's selective response. So if I was to send an email to somebody and I didn't get a response, I'd probably, if I really wanted to get them to respond, I'd probably follow up with them and just say, just check in, did you get my email? And if it was a voicemail, I'd probably ring them again and say, just check in, did you get my first voicemail? But I can think of loads of situations where that wouldn't be possible. So if I'm in a relationship, you know, in a work situation where the relationship with my boss is not as robust as I want it to be, potentially that's quite scary to sort of double check with that kind of person. It feels a bit pushy, feels like, oh, I'm not sure I want to go there. So from my perspective, of course, I mean, I've seen him walking around with his phone. He's got his phone, he's got my voicemail, and I know that he's been checking his emails because he's responded to some other stuff. So I've now created, okay, so he just doesn't want to talk about that then. So that's really shaped my behaviour going forward. So I think selective response to this is inadvertently setting up a whole lot of downstream, unintended consequences for people. I was doing some coaching with a group of people on a big construction project recently, and they're fairly distracted by the meetings culture in their organisation, and they were complaining about somebody, a senior person. I know it's always a senior person, it's not fair, but complaining about this person who kind of arrives late and then wants to hasn't prepared, it's just improv all the way, doesn't really want to stick to the agenda, just wants to talk about the things they want to talk about, hasn't done their actions, wants a recap. It's kind of high on frustration for all the people in the meetings, because from their perspective, he just doesn't trust us. He doesn't trust us, because if he did trust us, he would have delegated to us, he would have let us get on. From his perspective, he's just trying to fit it all in. He's a good guy, just, spread a bit thin, need to keep spinning those plates, and if I don't go, it won't happen, So there's this fundamental disconnect between what he's intending and what's being received by them. In behavioural science, there is a concept called learned helplessness, and it describes when we subject people to an unwanted stimuli. So something unpleasant is in my environment, and it doesn't matter what I do, I can't get out of the way of it. So over time, we just give up. So it's the behavioural version of resistance is futile, I'm just going to lie on the floor. So sometimes we inadvertently set up learned helplessness in an environment. So if you think about micromanaging, that's quite an easy example, because by getting over-involved in the detail, we create a dependency. So people have learned not to bother trying to do anything by themselves because someone's going to come in, and meddle and get over-involved, so why would you make the effort? So to move from a very aversive micromanaging environment to a really potentially positive, empowered environment, it's really big. It's a really big gap. So it's hard just to it's not a situation that you can just flip or reverse. You can't just, Bob said to me, you can't just cut the strings of learned helplessness. This is definitely a shaped journey over time, and the people who are subject to those conditions in the environment are absolutely set up to suspect that things are always going to go back. So they've got a consequence history that goes on for a long time. So if if there's even the merest whiff that this is heading back towards micromanagement, then people will go back into learned helplessness. I just don't see the point of making the effort. So I think being too busy, it seems like it's such a basic thing, isn't it? It's such a, God, why do we spend time? Why do these guys spend time talking about things like that? Because it's the day-to-day stuff that sets up all of these unintended consequences. And I think it's a deliberate application of being strategic day-to-day that helps us kind of skip over those potholes that we kind of just otherwise would just drive through if we weren't paying attention. Thank you very much.